meeting is open to the public and there's no items that contain exempt information, so all of the meeting will be held in public. The meeting will be webcast as usual. We've got one remit question and one possible supplementary question from a member of the public who may be joining us online, which is why the screen is here. So hopefully they'll be able to join us shortly. If I could just ask that phones are switched to silent, check myself, and we've got no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, then do, as always, follow the Town Hall staff. I will first ask each member of the Policy Committee to introduce themselves, and then we'll ask all of the officers who are here to also introduce themselves. So, my name is Tom Hunt. I am the Leader of the Council and Chair of this committee, and as always, I'll start on my left.
Councillor Angela Argenzio, Chair of Adult Health and Social Care Policy Committee.
Douglas Johnson, Chair of Housing.
Good afternoon. Abdul Qayyum, Councillor Firth Park, Co-Chair of Licensing.
Good afternoon. Councillor Zahira Naz, Councillor for the Darnell Ward and Chair of the Finance Committee.
Councillor Laura Moynihan, Deputy Chair of Communities, Parks and Leisure and substitute for Councillor Dorndale.
Fran Belbin, Councillor for Firth Park Ward and Deputy Chair of the Committee.
David Barker, Councillor for Richmond Ward, another Co-Chair of Licensing, and here today as a substitute member.
Councillor Jordan, Dorton Totley Ward, Chair of Environmental Services and Regulation.
Mohammed Marouf, Chair of Economic Development, Skills and Culture.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Curtis Crossthorne. I finally updated my name. I am the Chair of Communities, Parks and Leisure.
Councillor Mike Levery, West Ecclesfield Ward, Vice Chair of Finance and substituting for Martin Smith.
Good afternoon, my name is Diane Hurst. I'm a councillor for Richmond Ward and I'm here in my capacity as the leader of the Sheffield Community Councillors Group.
Thank you very much, everybody. All members of this committee are equal, but it hasn't escaped my notice that only one has a fan right by them. So I'm not sure how that has happened, but we need to look at equalising that, I think, for future meetings. So just, I'll ask officers to introduce themselves now, perhaps starting over with Matt on the left.
Hello, Matt Barisher, the Interim Director of Adult Social Care.
Hello, Ashman Ali, Executive Director of Neighbourhood Services.
Kate Josephs, Chief Executive.
Robert Parkin, Assistant Director for Legal Services.
Craig Rogerson, Democratic Services.
Philip Gregory, Director of Finance and Commercial Services.
Kate Martin, Exec Director, City Futures.
Greg Fell, Strategic Director of Public Health Integrated Commissioning.
Great, thank you very much. And just for clarity and for the minutes, we've got apologies from Councillor Dorndale, Councillor Martin Smith and Councillor Ben Miskell, and Councillors Moynihan, Levery and Barker are substituting for them. Item 2, as I've said, there's no items that contain any exempt information. Item 3, declarations of interest. Is there any member who wishes to declare an interest in any items of business on today's agenda? Item number 4, minutes of the previous meetings, which were held on the 30th of April and 19th of May. Could I ask that people are happy with those minutes and approve them as a correct record? Thank you very much. Item 5 is the appointment of substitute members to the Charity Trustee Sub-Committee, and this is to note the appointment by the monitoring officer in consultation with the relevant political group whips of Councillors Tim Huggan, Rebecca Atkinson, Marieanne, Elliot and Christine Gilligan Kubo as substitute members of the Charity Trustee Sub-Committee with effect as of last month. Are members happy to approve those substitute members? Thank you all very much. Item 6 is public petitions, questions and statements. So there's one remit question that was submitted and then subsequent supplementary question. And we were hoping that they might be able to join us online. They haven't yet, so I think what we'll do is we'll provide a written response to that question when when we're able to make contact with them after this meeting. Item 7 is member questions, none received today. Item 8, retirement of staff, and you'll see in your agenda pack that, as always, there are a number of colleagues who have retired from the council, and this is a moment for us as a committee to express our thanks and appreciation for their many years of long service to this council, but also to the city. I hope members will join me in thanking them for their long years of service, and we wish them all a very happy and long retirement. Thank you all very much. Item 9 is our work programme, and with this, let me hand over to Craig to present the work programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members will see in their pack item 9 a copy of the latest version of the work programme. Since the last meeting, there are 1 or 2 changes to draw to your attention. There's one additional item on today's agenda, which is the Sheffield Legends item, which is at item 13. We've got 3 new items, an update of the Nablus Friendship Agreement, which is coming in October. And then we've got a couple of regular annual reports, violence against women and girls and white ribbon accreditation coming in November, and then a corporate complaints and ombudsman report coming in April next year. That's in addition to the report that's on the work programme for September. You will see that one of the items is moved. That's the burial provision in Sheffield report. That is rescheduled to September. And as set out in the report, the reasoning for that is that although work on the issue is progressing well, further work is needed on that to provide a more informed update, and that will increase the likelihood of being able to identify some sites within that report. Obviously, that has an impact on the 6th of August meeting. At the moment, we don't have any items for that meeting, and we've consulted with senior leadership, and that does appear to be the case. So that's my update, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Craig. Happy to take any questions or comments on that. And I think what I'd ask is, with members' approval, that with the moving of the agenda item from August to September, that we take a decision to not have that meeting in August, given that there is no scheduled business at that point. Are there any questions or comments for Craig about the work programme? No. Members happy then to move ahead with that and with the recommendation that we don't have the August meeting as scheduled? Okay, thank you all very much. Right, moving then on to item number 10. This is a report about the year ahead, which is going to be presented to us by Jonathan. Jonathan, welcome to your first SNR in your new role. For the benefit of everyone in the room and people who may be watching online, could you briefly introduce yourself and then introduce the report, please? Thank you.
I can, thank you. Yes, I'm the new Director of Strategy and Communications, Jonathan Clifton, so nice to be here. So this paper sets out the context for the committee's work over the next year and makes some recommendations for areas of focus. In particular, it recommends a focus on driving delivery of the council plan and on developing our policy approach in the areas of prevention and public service reform. But before we talk about the future, I thought it was just worth reflecting briefly on where we've come from in the previous year. So last year we made a lot of progress on the council's strategy work. So Sheffield City Council adopted its council plan in 2024, and over the last year we've built on this with a set of tier 1 strategies that will direct our work and resources in key areas. We've also made important steps to change the way we work, so starting to rebuild trust and relationships with our communities, our local and national partners. For example, we've worked with anchor institutions and voluntary sector organisations to build the new Stronger Together infrastructure. We've built a strong partnership with Homes England on regeneration. We've selected by the Cabinet Office to be one of the pioneers for their Test, Learn and Grow programme to improve public services. And just last week, the Prince of Wales was in Sheffield as part of the Homewards project to tackle homelessness. So as we go into the next year, there's some real strengths to build on, but there's still clearly a lot more work to do to deliver for our citizens. And it's with that in mind that this paper sets out the context and priorities for the year ahead, and it makes two main points. So first, it commits that the council plan remains our North Star, and that a big focus for this committee and for the organisation will be on transforming our organisation so we can deliver on that. We're acutely aware that plans don't build trust, delivery does, and it's vital that we now focus on that. The main way that the council will be transforming its organisation is through the Future Sheffield programme. That's been covered in more detail in the next item, so I'm not going to go into that here. But the second point that the paper makes is that there are cross-cutting areas that will require new policy development. So the report notes that there's a number of changes at the local, regional and national level that will provide opportunities to work in different ways. For example, the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority will become a Mayoral Strategic Authority with more flexible integrated budgets. Central government is committed to allocating multi-year funding settlements to local government, along with a new performance regime that aims to focus more on high-level outcomes rather than sort of tightly prescribed funding pots for specific outcomes. And the Sheffield Policy Campus has been chosen as the lead for the government's community mission focused on increasing opportunity. So this will give us the potential and responsibility to design services in new ways. And the report recommends two particular areas of focus for Strategy and Resources Committee. The first is on prevention. So full council committed as part of the motion to approve the 25-26 budget to focus on prevention. We recognise that it's better for citizens and for our budget to prevent problems from happening in the first place, rather than just responding once they've happened. And while we've established some successful practice, for example, our family hubs and public health programmes, we've got more work to do to embed prevention through everything that we do. And the second area of focus that we recommend is on public service reform. We can build a public service reform sort of policy programme that combines the power of digital technology, uses our convening power alongside other key partners in the city, such as the NHS and the police, and the work of the Sheffield Policy Campus to reshape services with the people of Sheffield. And so they're the two main areas of focus that this committee is being asked to approve for the year ahead.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for that overview. We'll now, as always, open it up for any members who might wish to ask any questions to Jonathan or comment on the paper. Are there any members who would like to come in? I see Councillor Johnson first.
Thanks. Just a brief comment really rather than the question. I was glad you spelt out about the prevention. I just wanted to observe that we often talk about prevention without really specifying what we're preventing. There's always something at the end of that sentence, and you put it quite beautifully, and then preventing problems from happening in the first place. And I just wondered, whenever we use the word prevention, we should maybe be clear in reports and meetings what we're trying to prevent, because sometimes there is that task of focusing on the presenting problem so that we know what we're facing. That's all. Very happy with the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members who might wish to comment? Councillor Maroof.
Thank you, Chair. This might be a domestic issue, so I know we're looking at the overview of the strategic part of the business in Sheffield City Council, but it is something I actually raised in audit as well in my time as Chair. There is communications with the public. It's obviously communications in your title, so I thought that might be the cue for me to ask this question. Is when people are contacting the Council, and generally speaking, a lot of people, the complaints we get as members on the doorstep, etc., is you're on the line for such a long time and then the line drops. That's for housing, that's for business rates, that's for rates in general, all sorts of things like that. And what I was assured in audit and standard was that this area would be looked into. And I'm assuming that's part of the service that we really need to provide the public out there as well. Because time and time again, I think most members will probably resonate with me on this, that this has become a big issue for the city. And I know it's been addressed, but I think it needs to be addressed quickly before we start doing much wider things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. No? Okay. Councillor, Jonathan, if you want to come back, but also I know just Kate Joseph would like to come in on one point as well. Yeah.
Just quickly, so Councillor Maroof, I think on the matter of customer services and communications and direct interaction. We're going to be speaking later about the Future Sheffield programme, which includes a very significant programme of reform and investment in our frontline facing customer services. So I think it'd be really good if we could hold that thought and that question for that item, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, happy with that on that answer. And yeah, absolutely, you're right, Councillor Johnson. I think a key part of the recommendation here is over the course of this year is to get clearer definitions of prevention, actually what that therefore means in practice for our policy programme. So we'll bear that in mind.
Great, thank you. And I think what's really important here is that we kind of look at some of the links between prevention and public service reform. I think they're presented as two items, but they clearly are interconnected, and a way in which they've been brought together well over the last few months is through the work that's been taking place in our Family Hub service, which has been part of the Cabinet Office's Test, Learn and Grow programme, which has been about how do we work to empower frontline staff to be able to test new ways of listening with residents, working with residents, and then implement findings to bring about changes in those services. And there's been some very promising early findings from that. And I think that embedding that concept of testing and learning throughout our prevention work is something that we can feed into this work. So I'd suggest that we do, perhaps at a future briefing of this committee, there's a full look at that Test, Learn and Grow programme so that people can see in a bit more detail about some of the work that's been taking place with that. And it clearly bodes well. It connects to the fact that Sheffield Policy Campus has been selected as the home of the Opportunity Mission, which in time should mean that more decisions are being made outside of London, informed by the wealth of policy expertise that there is in this city. Okay, I haven't seen any of the members who wish to come in, so in which case I'm going to move us on to the recommendations, which is that we welcome the continuing progress of the Council Plan, the strategy framework, including development of the community strategy, and that we continue our work to drive forward the transformation of Sheffield City Council, that we agree to the development of cross-cutting policy work on prevention and public service reform, harnessing the opportunities presented by multi-year funding settlements, the Sheffield Policy Campus, and a greater focus on place-led change. Our members happy to support those recommendations. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jonathan. Item number 11 on our agenda today is the 2024-25, so the last financial year, quarter 4 budget monitoring report, and we are joined by Jane Wilby today. Thank you very much. Jane, perhaps you could briefly introduce yourself and then introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Wilby, Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting, and I'll provide a brief overview of the Quarter 4 24-25 Budget Monitoring Report, which provides essential context for the next item on today's agenda, which is the Medium-Term Financial Strategy and Future Sheffield Transformation Programme. The report was taken to the Finance and Performance Committee on the 16th of June, and the final outturn is not reported to each policy committee in this cycle due to the timing, so it's important that the other policy committee chairs today are cited on that position. We've now submitted our draft accounts for the period, and we're in the process of closing the first quarter of 25-26, which will be reported to the Finance Committee in August. As we close the 24-25 financial year, the Council reported a net overspend of 34.7 million against the General Fund budget, which is approximately 7% variance to net revenue budget. This was broadly in line with expectations and consistent with the forecast reported throughout the year. Whilst this has been a difficult position to manage, we can take some assurance from the robustness and consistency of our financial monitoring to ensure that reported position is a true and fair reflection of our financial performance. There are 3 key areas of financial pressure to highlight. So number 1 is children's and family services. This area continues to experience high demand and cost pressures, particularly in placements with a reported overspend of 1.9 million and home-to-school transport overspend of 6.1 million. There is ongoing work in this space to optimise the use of passenger assistance, optimise fleet and taxi journeys with transport teams, and recommend the use of personal travel budgets and travel to promote independence alongside independent travel training with children. Despite some mitigation, the overspend here remains significant due to the high number of pupils receiving transport provision. The adult social care, the service closed the year with a 13.6 million budget overspend. Whilst the service has delivered 29.4 million savings this year, the underlying demand and complexity of care needs are growing. The risk of future overspends remains high without transformation. A comprehensive review has been undertaken by our transformation partner to look at service delivery models, data trends, commissioning practices to identify opportunities for reducing that cost base and managing demand more effectively, laying the groundwork for sustainable financial resilience and improve outcomes for future years. And number 3 is homelessness and housing services. An unprecedented surge in homelessness and a shortage of affordable housing in the city has led to budget overspends totalling 11.7 million, 6.2 in temporary accommodation and 5.5 million in supported accommodation. And this is where the council has incurred housing benefit subsidy losses, where the government doesn't fully subsidise all the housing benefit payments made by the council, even though it sets the rules to determine the amount that the council has to pay. There have been significant proactive steps taken by services throughout the year to take control of the situation through void management, review of the housing allocations policy, service redesign, process reviews and engagement with key suppliers. Teams are working collaboratively with finance colleagues to move to a sustainable position and reduce the number of people supported in the city in unsuitable accommodation. The council has drawn on reserves to balance the 24-25 position. Whilst this was necessary, it does reduce our resilience going forward. To fund the overspend this year, the council has drawn on 7.9 million from a specific provision set aside for the housing subsidy losses and 26.8 million from our budget contingency reserve. This leaves a residual budget contingency reserve balance of just £800,000 for 25-26. If further overspends arise next year, we will need to rely on specific earmarked reserves, making it essential that we continually assess our reserves position to ensure our resilience against future risks. This reinforces the need for a sustainable financial strategy, one that reduces reliance on reserves and delivers long-term savings through transformation. This report brings us into the next item, the medium-term financial strategy and future Sheffield transformation programme. The Q4 report makes it clear that we cannot continue to rely on short-term fixes. The financial outlook remains challenging if no action is taken. Our future Sheffield transformation programme is therefore not optional, it is essential. We need to reshape how we deliver services, invest in prevention, make better use of technology and data, improve service delivery and support long-term financial sustainability. The programme is focused on building sustainable operating base and will be the key to addressing the challenges that we face. The Q4 report shows that while we've managed to close the year in line with expectations and begun some important work to manage the position, the underlying issues do remain. The decisions that we make in coming months through the MTFS and transformation will be critical to securing a financial sustainable future for Sheffield. I'm happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Right, Councillor Argentio and Councillor Crosthorne.
Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for the clarity of the report and your presentation. You know, as ever, you're always very clear. I mean, notwithstanding the fact that we know our long-term kind of challenges, they've been the same for a few years now, and obviously they're not getting any better. They've not got any better. And I know that that's a national trend as well. It's not just something that is peculiar to Sheffield. I was just wondering whether, because there was quite a lot of work done at one point about the supported exempt accommodation. And we, Councillor Johnson and myself, we've had lots of correspondence about this, but some of the messages that we've been sent have been contradictory, are not clarified the situation. So I was wondering whether we are still working on addressing how we can change that, and how we can, you know, is it a legal obligation that we have to pay? We haven't had a yes or no answer on this, and it would be really good to maybe at the briefing having some kind of clarity on that. I was also wondering how the other host cities are doing on this exact issue and how we compare, because it won't be something that is peculiar to Sheffield. This will be a national thing, and it would be good to see what Leeds or Manchester or Nottingham are doing into how they're addressing it, and maybe we can use good practice if they've got any ideas, or we can put our heads together to try to resolve it, whilst we, we also try to address, the challenges that we have in terms of homelessness and, finding suitable accommodation for people.
Great, thank you. I think on this one, probably come to Philip in a second. What I was just going to say, though, is if members have got questions which might be more relevant for the MTFS item, we do hold them. If they're about the Q4 report, then we can touch upon them there. But just they're obviously interconnected reports, and so we'll just make sure that we...
It's on page 58.
Yeah, no, it's... I'm not saying that your question wasn't related, but I think we want to make sure that we do touch upon the MTFS in the right place as well. Councillor Crossthorne, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report. And it does feel like there's a common theme with every budget monitoring report that we receive, which is that we're really struggling with social care and with SEN, and they are arguably some of the most important services that we provide as an organisation. And I know that there's been a lot of hard work with the teams to try and get efficiencies and to try and get the teams working even better for the city. So I don't mean to discredit the work that's been done there. I think they're working really hard. Would it be fair to say then that it's demand that's sort of outstripping the work that's been done within the teams, and that it's demand that's sort of catching us off guard a little bit with that?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maroof, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm referring to page 63 here, in particular to home to school transport, something that I'm acutely aware of in 6 years on education, but this is something that's very hard to actually control. And if we continue to do the number of EHCPs that we're actually doing, that number will continue to increase. And I think officers have done an absolutely fantastic job in trying to reduce that with transport trainers and other people to get involved in this to make people more independent. But if you remember, we had quite a huge backlash on this from the community, where we had to sort of redo the recommendation on that. Is there enough flex in the budget to allow for more people accessing this service? It's similar to Councillor Crossthorne's question, because that area, and also when you look further down, there are many other areas within the education budget which is not fixed. It's very, very flexible. It depends on what sort of cases we get coming forward. So it's hard to predict. I know you've done a fantastic job. Education people have done a great job. But I'm still very sceptical that these figures are what the ones we'll end up with, because the more awareness that is created amongst people, the more people want this. And the backlash that we suffered in education was quite significant. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Levery and then a few more people, so we'll take a pause after Councillor Levery.
Thanks, Chair. The overspend's gone up from 17 million 23-24 to well over 30 million this year, but I do want to congratulate the team. The forecasting now is consistent all the way through every quarter, so we know where we stand at Q1 in terms of what potential overspend will be, and we'll be looking at that no doubt in August to see where we stand. Now, with no reserves left in terms of operational support, so will we have a strategy pulled together in terms of earmark reserves about how we will develop and go into them once we know at Q1 what the picture looks like? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, question around exempt accommodation, 2 questions more broadly around kind of demand for the services that City Council provides, and then a question around reserves. So, I will hand back to Jane, but you, I think, may want to, I don't know if Philip's coming in, but...
Thank you, Chair. I think I probably will hand over to Philip. In terms of the things that we've highlighted in the report, there are 3 key areas really in terms of where the council's facing pressure, and there's some key actions and activities underway which Philip will be able to provide more background and detail on, because he's been a little bit closer to some of that work. and also probably address the financial strategy for 25-26 and how we're going to be presenting that position to you. So I'll pass to Philip to cover those.
Great, thank you. So for exempt accommodation, there are two elements to this that we're sort of tackling. One is making sure that we're applying the benefits regulations appropriately, so making sure that where we can claim benefits, we do, but also where claims are made that create a financial pressure for us that are not valid, that we rebuff those and make sure that we reject those claims. We're also looking at the providers of support exempt accommodation, in particular those who provide accommodation that we can't claim back the full cost in benefits for. We're working with them to identify actions that will enable us to reclaim in full the support that they provide. So we are looking at other areas that they operate in where they are able to do that, so that we can mirror those conditions, so that we're able to claim back in full from housing benefits the cost of the support that they provide. That's quite complex in terms of legal setup, and it will take a while for them to transition their properties over into a different operating model. But we're working closely with them to progress that alongside our housing colleagues to make sure that the accommodation and with social care colleagues to make sure the support that's provided is appropriate for the people that are in that accommodation. For the questions around demand, both for adults and home to school transport, we have, as part of the medium-term financial strategy, we model quite closely what we think demand will be. That's an estimate and an assumption that we make each year. What we have seen in particular with adults is that after we'd set those assumptions, the demand for those services did increase quite sharply. So that's one of the drivers for the overspend in adults, is actually we have seen a spike in demand that was unexpected. It's sort of out of trend with previous years. We're monitoring that closely to see whether that straightens off the demand or whether that increase continues at the same pace. And then for home to school transport, we are working closely. Again, we look at the forecasting for that. We did put more money into the budget this year for 25-26. So again, one of those areas that we're closely monitoring will be the progression of pupils between primary school and secondary school, and the need for transport that might change as a result of that. We will also be looking at how we can target children who currently are transported to school in taxis, and how they can be provided for in our in-house fleet, and also how we can expand our travel trainers who promote independent travel for our children. And then to Councillor Levery's question on reserves, we will be bringing the paper and the update on that strategy for you in August, when we bring the update on Q1 to you in Finance and Performance Committee.
Thank you very much, Philip. So I've got Councillor Naz, Councillor Belbin, and then I will come back round to Councillor Argentio if you've got a follow-up question, but two people have already... Sorry, say again.
Sorry, how we compare to other core cities, and if we do any kind of looking at what they're doing on the same issues that wasn't addressed.
If you could just briefly address that now.
Yeah, we don't have any benchmarking for that at the moment. It's a good question. We'll go and look at that and work with our core cities colleagues to understand what their position is and what they're doing, if they have a similar issue to us.
Councillor Naz.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jane, for the report. Philip's answered some of the questions that were raised. I'd just like to say that the Finance Committee will continue to pay attention to the budgets that have overspent, and this includes adult social care, home to school, transport and homelessness. But we know there's a lot of work that is already going on in that area, but the Finance Committee is paying attention to that area. But like Philip said, there has been a demand and increase. And if you look at pages 79 and 80, it kind of gives you numbers. So for adult social care, for example, we have seen an increase of 13%. But for home to school, there's been a 92% increase since April 2019. So even though there's a lot of work already happening in that area, the demand is continue to rise. And there has been a spike, because I've noticed locally in my area as well, I've had a lot more casework for referral to adult social care services and home to school transport as well. So, you know, even though there's a lot of work going on in that area, and Finance Committee continue to have conversations with other committees on the overspends, what we are seeing that, you know, there is being more demand for services coming from our communities, and it's quite difficult to kind of continue. So even though we raise the funding for the different committees, we're still getting lots of people who need the services who are now coming into the system.
Thank you. Councillor Belvin, please.
Thank you. I wanted to just touch on this question of demand, and I suppose there's two types of demand, isn't there? There is the demand that we've discussed that is kind of out of our hands to a large extent, and things like the enormous growth in education, health and care plans, for example, that perhaps put that pressure on our SEND spending and on our homeschool transport spending. And then there's what we've perhaps termed as failure demand, where some of our services are not been working as well as they could have been doing. And you mentioned in the introduction there around, for instance, the work we've done around voids and managing voids better and how that's led to savings. So I suppose I was just trying to, I'm not saying that we can't do anything about that externally driven demand, and obviously we've talked about some of the things that we are doing around homeschool transport, for example. But there's clearly a need there as well that we're looking at that national government level to, and obviously around SEND spending and things like that, that is something that government is looking at. So I just wondered if we're able, or if it's too simplistic even to try and do that, but to look at to what extent this is driven, some of the envelope spend is driven by that external demand that we probably have less control over, and what is perhaps a bit of failure demand that we have more control over and that we can do better, particularly through our transformation programmes that we'll be coming on to discuss.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to reflect on the fact that we have been addressing these very substantial overspends for some time. I'm just actually reviewing back an email chain on the cost of exempt accommodation and temporary accommodation housing benefit issue. And that goes back 2 years when we've been having backwards and forwards with officers trying to get to the bottom of this. And I appreciate this is a very complex area of law, even by the standards of benefits law. But there are some important points there. And so I just want to say really that actually councillors know, and across our committee on housing, have been trying to dig into this, and even though it's difficult, so people have been asking the questions, it has sometimes been quite difficult to get officers to give us actual factual answers. So notwithstanding the fact that actually I'm aware that officers are working hard on this, but there are some, I'd really like us to be able to get our teeth into this, because obviously it's not just about, it's about the fact that, you know, these very substantial overspends have an enormous impact on the services that we can provide to the people who are most in need of the services overall. So it's really important. So I'm wondering if, Philip, this is a prompt for me to pick this up with you outside the meeting. Then we could have a talk about some things there. And certainly when it comes to comparisons with core cities, and we're on the temporary accommodation side, the figures I've seen actually show there's quite a range of patterns with different core cities because of the different ways that we approach things. Thanks.
Thank you. I think a couple of people want to come back in to pick up some of those points, and then I'll just comment as well. But let me first hand over to Jane if there's any points you want to pick up, and I know Ajman I've seen wants to come in.
For Councillor Belvin's point about demand, I suppose part of what the Future Sheffield programme absolutely is trying to do is about that service transformation piece and look at areas in efficiency and failure demand, and really think about how we're delivering those services that creates extra capacity. So when we look at temporary accommodation as the example there, there's been a huge amount of work this year to think about the process involved in how we are dealing with those cases and sort of focusing more efforts on prevention in there. And we have seen that shift. So we are, you know, there's quite an ambitious target in there to move from, you know, moving families down to zero by the end of the year. So we won't be housing any temporary accommodation, families in temporary accommodation by the end of the year, which is very ambitious. And part of that's been done through better utilisation of our own stock. So again, moving those voids through quicker, the allocations policy. So it's doing things within our own control. That failure demand piece, as you said, we have focused very much on that in that individual service. And you're absolutely right. There's only so much you can do about, we have got the opportunity to think about how we deliver services differently, and that's happening in the adult space. So I'm sure Matt will come to talk about that in future sessions when we're talking about what we're doing there, that we're really trying to shift how we're working in those delivery models to really work on demand management, because, the demand at the front door doesn't change actually. And if you just carry on layering that on top of inefficiencies, we're going to lead to more and more overspend. So we absolutely do need to address those service inefficiencies, which is absolutely what the Future Sheffield programme is all about, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about today. In terms of the housing benefit comment that we've talked about, again, it kind of, the surge that we saw a couple of years back, it really did kind of make us look at, again, with the process. So it probably speaks to your point as well, Councillor Belbin, about how we're managing the service. And we're absolutely making sure that when we're reviewing the claims, we are reviewing them in line with the policy regulations. So making sure that we are scrutinising those claims in absolutely the right way. So again, to try and reduce the burden on the authority, but at the same time, we're investing in the work with suppliers to make sure that we're making some inroads into managing that financial position. Different authorities do different things. So yes, we are speaking to our neighbours, but I think the benchmarking data is not really a consistent set across the board, but there's certainly more that we can do in that space. I don't know whether Adrian wanted to come in on any particular housing comments.
Okay, thank you. And I think what we'll do, Councillor Johnson, is make sure that we provide that update to the Housing Committee in terms of the exempt accommodation work that the team has been doing. They've been working quite a lot over the last year in terms of doing that piece of work, and that was led by the previous director that's no longer with us. And we've got a board that looks at all of that, and just to sort of highlight some of the stuff that Philip has said to you. So we provide that detailed report to the committee in due course. In terms of the overall homelessness work, clearly we're doing a lot of work in this space in terms of looking at assessing the demand, but also the prevention of it. And you'll know that we undertook some external expertise that was brought in to be able to assess, some of the root causes of that and what we can do. So lots of attention has been paid to supporting staff, training staff, making sure that we're recruiting to vacant posts, looking at processes and training them, and being more proactive at the front door in terms of assessing those quite quickly. But also when people are in temporary accommodation, making sure that we follow those up quite quickly to get them out into permanent accommodation where it's appropriate, and making the assessment as quickly as we can. And the trajectory so far has been that it's been going in the right direction, continues to do so. So we are optimistic with that concerted effort that will continue that way. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. And I think, picking up in the next agenda item is the references there to the fair funding consultation that's out right now, which is an attempt by the government to change how local authorities are funded to better reflect the level of need in individual local authorities, and also deprivation. So we'll be working through the implications of that, but I think to address a lot of the points that have been picked up today, councils being funded according to the level of need will significantly help our situation. The other, to link right back to the very first agenda item where we talked about the importance of prevention, we've all said and agreed that it is better for our residents and for our budget to prevent problems from happening in the first place rather than dealing with the consequences of them. And I think we saw last week with the Prince of Wales visit to the city, an example of some really, really good prevention work that's taking place in the city as a way to reduce the number of families who are reliant on temporary accommodation. The innovative housing project, as part of the Homewards work, has seen a number of private sector landlords make properties available, which now means that there are families moving in this month who are being supported to help navigate their tenancies, which means that it's better for them to have a safe, secure, stable home, and better for the council's budget to not have to pay temporary accommodation bills. We've also seen some really innovative work being launched at Meadowhead School as part of the upstream piece of work, where children who are at risk of potentially being homeless or other vulnerabilities are being identified, and then bespoke support can be put in place to support them and their families. That's the kind of prevention work that we need that will help our budget situation as we go forward. So some good signs building on the work that clearly we need to be doing, and of course I'm sure Councillor Johnson will make sure that the Housing Policy Committee continues to maintain a focus on the questions of temporary accommodation and exempt accommodation that we've talked about today. Thank you all. So I don't see anyone else who wants to come in. So the recommendation before us is that we note the updated information on the 24-25 revenue budget outturn as described in the report and as set out by Jane, including the detailed committee budget monitoring information and the management actions provided. Are people happy to note that recommendation? Thank you very much. Thank you, Jane. Right, moving straight through then on to item 12, which is the medium-term financial strategy, or MTFS, and also the Future Sheffield update. And for this agenda item, we are joined by Philip Gregory and Catherine Mills. Philip and Catherine, just for the benefit of everyone in the room and people watching online, could you introduce yourself and then briefly introduce the report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Philip Gregory, Director of Finance, Commercial and Performance Services. I'm the Council Section 151 Officer.
My name is Catherine Mills and I'm the Assistant Director of Transformation and I lead the Future Sheffield programme.
So Catherine and I will introduce this report for the committee, which combines what might have been two reports, but which have been brought together to provide a comprehensive update on the future direction of the Council. This committee has previously received reports on the MTFS in March 2025 and Future Sheffield in November 2024. This council is ambitious and wants to become the kind of organisation that truly delivers for the people and businesses of Sheffield, with a growing emphasis on enabling early prevention and intervention, particularly in our most disadvantaged communities, to prevent challenges occurring rather than responding once they've happened. The council faces a number of challenges over the next 4 years, which is the period of time covered by this medium-term financial strategy. The council is being proactive in responding to these challenges, which aren't just financial, choosing to be bold in our ambition to deliver for the city. Future Sheffield is an ambitious and extensive transformation programme planned to deliver outcomes over 3 years from 26-27. In preparation for the delivery of this change, a target operating model for the council has been developed. This is the blueprint that sets out how the council will operate to deliver against the council plan outcomes. It ensures that all the services within the council are aligned to the strategic aims that have been agreed by this committee and provides opportunities to identify how we will become the council that we want to be, one with people at its heart, providing consistent, modern, high-quality services that our city deserves. The key aims that Future Sheffield are aiming to provide is to improve the services that we deliver, with a focus on serving our residents, our businesses and our customers more effectively, online, on the phone and in person. Improving and modernising our processes and ways of working, with a focus on improving our use of technology. Designing services that are fit for the future, recognising the changing nature of our city and the increasing demand for our services. Improving support to our workforce, equipping people with the skills, the processes and the technology that they need in the changing world. To reduce our running costs, to ensure that we're financially sustainable as an organisation, and to deliver an organisation that can more effectively achieve the ambitions, both in the city goals and the council plan priorities, including our policy focus on people, prosperity and planet. Future Sheffield is our most coordinated and intentional approach yet to how the council can work differently, reshaping how we operate and redefining how our services will look and feel in the years ahead.
Thank you, Philip. What we've tried to do in Appendix 2 and 3 is to give you a far more detailed look now of what the Future Sheffield programme is looking like in terms of progress, future direction, and then how we are looking at how this work can actually develop the savings required. But I think, before we do this, I think, although we talked about the aims, one of the things that we need to start to be able to articulate is how does this actually look like in terms of how we operationalise and what would be different under Future Sheffield when we implement the target operating model. And the sort of four key ways I see this is that as a council we work across the organisation. So we actually look at how do we pool our resources and capabilities as opposed to looking at how do we work in siloed ways either in services and directorates. We really do need to have that focus on digital enablement. So this is both for staff and for customers, but that real first experience for everyone online, how that can work better, be more intuitive, and how can our internal teams then support that frontline delivery through using technology. We're really clear that we need to have a much more consistent experience of all stages of our customer and our colleagues' journeys, from getting support from the council. We need to be clearer and have that understanding of what are our service offerings and how can we simplify those processes across the layers of the operating model. And as we've heard several times throughout this committee, that emphasis on prevention and early intervention, how can we look as we redesign our services and look at how we function as an organisation, how do we start to look at how do we prevent problems either from happening or escalating rather than responding to once they've happened. So, as Philip said, we had an update report last November where we had started to work at what the operating model meant in terms of a transformation programme. Since that date, we have now scoped and identified 11 transformation programmes which sit across the 4 layers of the operating model. For each programme, we have a clear purpose aligned to the operating model and an ability to articulate how that programme will support the organisation to be different. All the programmes have a mix of both financial and non-financial benefits, which we will be tracking and monitoring. And this is to show that Future Sheffield as a transformation programme is more than just about saving the money, it is about us being a different organisation. So although 24-25 was predominantly our year of discovery and design, with only the customer experience and digital strategies further along and scoped into delivery, we are still able to report on a number of significant key achievements that we managed to achieve. We've done an awful lot of that in community engagement for our community strategy. We've supported the team with that work, and which I know will be coming later in the year. Again, we've already discussed this, but a team working with the housing colleagues has looked to support changes to our processes to enable us to reduce the housing voids by 300 and looking at a decrease in B&B expenditure. We've been working in the children's transformation to look at development of the family help model. In commissioning, we've now established a single contract register. This enables us as an organisation now to have one clear view of where we have contracts and where we give out grants, showing how we can then build that into looking at how we then work with these contractors going forward. We've introduced AI, so we've now, we're expanding our co-pilot pilot from 150 to 1,000 staff in the next few months. Over 24-25, we also did a trial of AI technology called Magic Notes in adult social care, which enabled colleagues to actually have more time to spend with our vulnerable people and then using their technology to do some of the process work. We've also achieved some financial savings through the digital strategy, through improving our contract management of mobile and laptop suppliers, shifting to a cloud-first approach, and bringing in some IT services in-house to reduce our reliance on third-party providers. So as we now move into 25-26, our focus is about delivery and implementation. In Appendix 3, we have outlined the expected next steps for each of the programmes over the next 6 months, and we'll report progress against these at the committee in November. Key actions which I'd like to draw your attention to includes the recruitment and capability building in the customer experience programme, which will enable us to develop a dedicated function which champions continuous improvement for customers by using insight and lessons learned to improve those customer journeys across the whole of the council, not just in the customer hub on an ongoing basis. Housing has been working on a new leadership structure and will be working to stand up the new transformation programme, which will help the development of new operating models required in the service and look at how do we sustain the improvements that we achieved last year into a more business as usual approach. We're going to progress our adults and children's programmes with a focus on how we can promote long-term outcomes through prevention. We'll be embedding the commissioning, procurement and contract management model and advancing the design and implementation of some key strategic capabilities in business support and finance in our strategic capabilities and enabling services layer to ensure we have that more consistent and improved model of working, as well as looking at how we embed further the use of AI and emerging technologies. Of course, though, we do have to look at how do we become a more financially sustainable organisation. So in Appendix 2, we've looked at the future Sheffield's role and how we can support the delivery of those financial savings. Through our discovery and planning stages, we have identified a potential saving of around 45 million. These savings have been aligned with the changes of the target operating model, and we've profiled them over the 3 years. The programmes are now working through those savings to look at how do we use service redesign, so we can look at how do we release vacancies, redesigning services with technology, improving processes and training, looking at our service levels and managing demand through self-service and failure demand reduction are all ways in which we look to achieve those savings. If we take the example of the customer experience programme, we can start to identify savings by bringing together the customer support teams to ensure we start having that consistency, look at enhancing training and tools, how can we use AI and technology better, simplifying online access for our customers and reducing those unnecessary failure demand contacts and actually improve productivity and efficiency. We are also looking for further savings by exploring third-party spend, renegotiating contracts, looking at shadow spend through centralised procurement and reviewing fees and charges against benchmarking and other identified areas. So I think it's clear to say that future Sheffield will be helping to support with the financial sustainability of the organisation, but it really is about that whole-scale transformation of Sheffield City Council. I'll now hand over to Philip to talk about the medium-term financial strategy.
Thank you. So the medium-term financial strategy, or the MTFS, sets out the future financial forecast for the Council. The aim is to set out the anticipated changes in budget required to deliver services over the period, combined with an assessment of income, including funding from government, and the scope of mitigations required to set a balanced budget in each of the 4 years. There are some important changes that will have an impact on our MTFS from next year. The most significant changes are amendments to the allocation of government funding for the Council. I'll speak about this in 2 ways. First is the approach that government will take to confirm how much funding we receive beyond a single year, and then secondly, the amendments to the way that government calculate how much funding we receive. The first change is the commitment from government to provide a 3-year funding settlement from next year, 26-27. This means that instead of the government confirming our funding for just the following financial year, usually in the December before the financial year starts, the government will provide confirmation of funding for 3 financial years in November or December this year. This will provide us with a level of certainty in funding for not just 26-27, but 27-28 and 28-29, the same time period that we're planning future Sheffield delivery over. Why is this important? Having this certainty over the 3-year period allows us to plan our approach to setting a balanced budget for those 3 years in a more systematic way. Whilst we still have to form our plan to deliver a balanced budget for 26-27 in a similar way to previous years, we have the opportunity to then plan our approach to the following 2 years much earlier. This multi-year approach will allow us to review the ebb and flow of demand for services, the delivery of future Sheffield, the funding available, and the strategic use of reserves to support our ambitions. The second change is the approach that government proposed to take in allocating funding to local authorities across England. The Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, or MHCLG, published their plans in a consultation on the 20th of June. The local government sector prepared to implement funding reforms called Fair Funding back in 2019, but these reforms were never implemented. Previous MTFS reports to this committee have highlighted that should those reforms have been implemented, the share of funding received by this council to provide services in the city would have been expected to increase. The new set of reforms that have been proposed are called Fair Funding 2. These proposals update the work of the original Fair Funding Review and propose implementation for 26-27. The aim of these reforms to funding are to target resources where they're most needed, as well as taking into account the ability of local authorities to fund their activity through council tax. The consultation that has been published doesn't include detailed figures for the 3 years of the funding settlement, but does provide the principles that will be used to determine funding and the supporting methodology. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to include the impact of these reforms in this version of the MTFS, as there are still significant variances in the changes in funding depending on the assumptions that we make on the application of the methodology that government have provided. It's expected to be positive, so an increase in funding for Sheffield City Council. So whilst we can't give you a set of numbers just yet, work is ongoing to model the implications of these reforms on the MTFS as details continue to emerge. I'd also add that this is a consultation from government, so there may be changes as a result of feedback which is provided through that consultation process. We do expect a policy statement to be issued by MHCLG around September, confirming any changes as a result of consultation, with detailed figures that will follow, provided by MHCLG in either late November or early December. Paragraph 2.5 of the report on page 77 sets out the 4 main areas of consideration under the Fair Funding 2 reforms. The first relates to the approach from government to reduce the number of individual grants into larger combined grants, moving towards outcomes-based accountability and ending competitive bidding for grant funding. The second area describes the approach the government will take to measuring the demands and needs of each local authority through a number of formulae. Sheffield's allocation of need is 1% of the total funding for local government in England. So if you were to rank those in order across every local authority, our rank is number 21. The third area of consultation is what's called a resources adjustment. This is a mechanism where government are aiming to direct funding to places that are less able to meet their needs through increases in council tax, places like Sheffield. This might also be referred to as council tax equalisation. Fourthly, there will be a transitional arrangement in place to phase the changes in funding over 3 years to avoid cliff edges of funding reductions for some councils as the changes work their way through the system. So there are other considerations that have been factored into the MTFS development. There's continued economic uncertainty, which follows a period of heightened inflation and increased demand for many of the services we provide. In preparing the MTFS, we make assumptions about the future profile of demand for services, cost pressure on the cost of delivering services, and on factors that might affect our income sources. The underlying assumptions that we use are provided in Annexes B and C of this paper from page 99. These detailed assumptions allow us to set the financial envelope for each of the next 4 years to be able to plan our approach to setting a balanced budget. The Council began to change its approach to budget management last year as we introduced priority-based budgeting to start to match what we spend to the Council plan outcomes. The work of Future Sheffield and the approach to the delivery of financial benefits builds on this work. So to some numbers. The overall budget gap reported to this committee in March 2025 was £52.3 million. This was the cumulative total over the 3 years from 2026-27 to 28-29. Now at this time of year and at this stage in the budget setting process, the MTFS is updated and an additional year is included so that the MTFS covers a 4-year period. The addition then of 29-30 increases the budget gap by £38.7 million. However, we have included the financial benefits from Future Sheffield within the MTFS, with the result that the overall budget gap is reduced by the £44.9 million that Catherine referred to. There's a forecast increase in budget pressures compared to the last MTFS of £35.2 million as a result of both increased forecast demand for social care services and inflation-linked increases in costs. The net result of those changes and the changes to assumptions results in an overall budget gap across the 4 years of £69.6 million. Further detail of these changes are shown in Annex A on page 98 of the report. There's a moment where there's a health warning at this point. So the budget gap that we have the most confidence in is the one for next year, 26-27. There's an increasing amount of uncertainty towards the budget gap in 29-30, as the economic variables could change significantly over that time period. This reinforces the benefit of having a 3-year funding settlement from government, as the level of uncertainty in 27-28 and 28-29 will be reduced once we receive this. And again, we expect to receive the figures in November and December this year. So the updated cumulative budget gap of £69.6 million includes known changes in government funding that were confirmed before Fair Funding 2 was announced. So we haven't been able to include the impact of the changes from Fair Funding 2, although we expect the funding gap will fall as a result of increases to funding from government. So the budget gap for next year, 26-27, is £7.7 million. This is usually the point in the budget setting process that we start business planning for next year, which is setting the budget gap that services need to deliver against so that we can set a balanced budget. For comparison, at this point in the process last year, the budget gap for 25-26 was £31.4 million. So the budget gap for 26-27 is much smaller in comparison. There's also further work ongoing to assess potential increases in fees and charges that could be included, as well as anticipated financial benefits from Fair Funding 2 and other benefits through Future Sheffield that are still being identified. All of which lead to the conclusion that the route to a balanced budget for next year is through the focused delivery of Future Sheffield. With that in mind, we'll not be launching the business planning process as we have in previous years, but we'll direct all of our attention on delivering the benefits through Future Sheffield. This hasn't been the work of a moment to get here. There's been significant effort with members and officers in teams across the council to lead to the position that we report to you today. We have a council plan, we have a blueprint for the future of the organisation to be able to deliver that plan. We have a transformation programme to adapt, modernise and put people at the heart of everything that we do. This is our plan for financial sustainability. To conclude, this report sets out for the committee a number of recommendations which support the next steps to be taken through Future Sheffield, which support the delivery of the target operating model. A proactive plan for the financial targets within Future Sheffield programmes in support of the MTFS, and the detail of the MTFS for the 4-year period from 2026-27 through to 29-30. Thank you for your attention. Catherine and I will be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Philip, Catherine, thank you very much for that really comprehensive overview of a huge amount of positive work that's taken place over the last couple of years to get us to this point. A number of colleagues have already indicated. First, I've got Councillor Belbin and Councillor Otton, and then if people would just raise their hands, I've got Councillor Naz, Moynihan, Levery, Cross. Okay, so quite a few. So we'll start off with Councillor Belbin and then Councillor Otton, please.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work on this. Perhaps I should say for the benefit of the public, there is a members Future Sheffield working group where we look, quite a few members here are on that group, where we look at this work in detail and have gone through most recently, for example, many of the savings that we potentially can see that we will make over the next 4 years and looked at that in detail. And I think it's because of that group that I understood everything you said there, Philip, and everything you said, Catherine, because, and that's something I do think we need to reflect on when we're talking about this programme for the public, I suppose, is that it's huge, it's complex, and I very much bear in mind what Councillor Maroof was talking about earlier when we're knocking on a door and talking to people about, well, actually, it means that you won't be spending an hour hanging on the phone, and I do think we need to put some thought into how we get across some of those messages to people who live in our city of, yes, it's a massive piece of work, and I think we all need to understand it in the round, but I think we really need to think about some really clear messages, because we are investing really heavily in this work, and we shouldn't get away from that as well. As you've spelt out really clearly, you know, we're very dependent on it, not for achieving the savings we need to achieve over future years, but this is not going back to making cuts to services, making cuts. It is about investing in doing things very differently. And so I do think we need to think about how we get that message across. And thank you for picking up one of the points I think that we were touching on in the earlier part of the discussion when we were looking at this year's budget. I know we didn't have savings targets for this year, but you've outlined some of the savings that we have made even before we've got to that point. It'd be great if you were able to quantify that. That'd be fantastic, just to give a bit of a sense that the investment we're putting into this, you know, we have a very robust reasoning for thinking that we will be making the savings that we are planning to make, and that'd be really helpful to understand that a bit more as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. It's a really helpful contribution which demonstrates the work that there's been cross-party to through that member working group to help get us to this point, and also that Future Sheffield is not something that's starting now, it's underway, and achievements are already being made. Councillor Austin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you. I echo Councillor Bellman's comments on Future Sheffield. My point, I suppose, is on the MTFS, and it's to Philip, I guess. And apologies if this is a curveball. I would like to. I'm going to turn the fan off because I think it's blowing on the mic, isn't it?
You should have taken that away from the very beginning.
I should say the fan. I would like to claim it as an environmental service, but it's actually finance brought it in here. So, the curveball I want to throw to you is this. I think there's another item you need to model in terms of the medium-term financial strategy, and it needs to go in your list on page 102, 103 of annexes. And it is this. The Transport Committee, Councillor Miskell, has a very fine vision for the city centre, which involves removing vehicles from the curbside and replacing that with high-quality public realm. Now, we've seen Pounds Park, which is an excellent facility, taking out that car park and putting in a park for the people of the city centre and people who visit, which is marvellous, is costing us a six-figure sum every year in terms of the lost revenue and the increased maintenance. Now, you know, we didn't quite go into that with our eyes open, but that's where we are and that's what it's cost us. The vision, as I understand it, and Councillor Miskell is I'm sorry he's not here, Councillor Miskell is very excited about this, which makes me even more nervous, is to generally in the city centre remove vehicles from the curbside and put in high quality public realm. And to my mind, that is going to have millions of pounds a year impact on the council's bottom line in terms of lost parking revenue and extended added maintenance for that public realm. And if we're going to do that, and maybe it's the right, you know, I discussed this with Ben, and he says, well, you know, maybe this is just the right thing to do, and maybe it is. But can we afford it? Right? The Transport Committee holds the budget, I understand, for the capital to do it, but it doesn't hold the budget that is then impacted in the following years in terms of the lost revenue and the added maintenance. So I would like to ask, can we have a line in this budget? So potentially, I'd say millions of pounds a year negative on the council's bottom line from removing vehicles in the city centre from the curbside and replacing that with high quality public realm, which, you know, may be merited, but maybe it needs to be scaled back in terms of our, you know, can we afford to do it, I suppose is the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There is obviously a cross-committee working group on parking enforcement right now. Do you think you're possibly part of that group?
I am part of that group. Yes, this is where it came up, yes.
Right, okay.
This is where Ben made me quite so nervous as I am.
Right, okay. So it's clearly something that you're very much involved in. So, Councillor Naz, and then we'll pause and then go back for some other comments and questions.
Thank you very much, Philip and Catherine, for the report today. We know there's lots of work going on in this area, and it's great to see it in the report today. We have now begun to move into priority-based budgeting approach to see how we can use the budget to deliver aims of the council plan. I think that's the right thing to do. The government has committed to introducing multi-year local government finance settlement for 3 years from 26-27. And I think that will really help us plan strategically, which is so important. I do believe that the fair funding review will be positive for the council, but right now we don't have the figures until the announcements are made, but it has gone out to consultation. But as discussed earlier, there is demand for services. And so even though this year we are not asking services to make savings, it's important that they continue to do the work to support the Future Sheffield programme. And we will be asking services to continue to do that. I mean, Future Sheffield has identified an ambitious route to deliver £44.9 million of savings. We have to ensure that services are working quite closely with you guys on that. I agree with Councillor Balbin's about how do we get this messaging, this comms out to people, because, you know, people will see the MTFS and they'll see that 69.9 million gap. And rightly, people will start to wonder or maybe panic what's going to happen in terms of us, you know, finding money for services. I think it's really important that we can communicate all the hard work that's going on internally to to residents on the doorstep. So if we can think about or look into kind of showing or communicating with people in Sheffield about all the good work that's going on, and especially around Future Sheffield and what your guys are trying to do, I think it'll really benefit people. So maybe that's a conversation we can have as part of the Future Sheffield working group. But I think definitely we need to have a discussion around that. But thank you for all the work that's going on.
Thank you. I'll start. I think the comms piece is really important. I think the challenge is that until recently it's been very much a theoretical programme design, and both for our colleagues actually and for the external public, it's a so what does that really mean? And I think certainly in the customer experience, so we've recently just launched a new customer relationship management software. This now means we're starting to have one view of our customer, which again we haven't had. Linked to that, we're hoping in the autumn to launch what will be My Account. So it means that the public can log in, create an account, and then when they raise a complaint or an issue, they will actually be able to track it online themselves, which again, we're not giving that visibility at the moment. And I think now we're moving into those sorts of developments. I know it's not the whole scale, but I do think there's a thing of actually saying to people, and this is what we mean by being a different council, this is how it will mean to engage with us. Because if not, we've just not been in that place yet. So I think definitely as we're moving into this, so what is this? We've just launched a new telephone repairs line for the housing service, which is 24 hours. We need to promote that better. We need to get that out. So as we can start to go, this is what Future Sheffield starts to look like, I think we really do need to do that. So, and I agree, we can bring this and talk about actually how do we support you as elected members for when you are on the doorstep, when you are having those questions, how can we help you with, and this is what Future Sheffield will do, this is where we're moving to. I think in terms of the savings, Councillor Belbin, in terms of, you were right, 24-25, we didn't have a target because it was about that discovery and design phase. We actually had, so in the pack, we had a year one saving for the digital strategy of 295,000. We've actually been working with finance business partners now that year is closed, and now we've calculated, and this will be going to the board, the digital transformation board next week, of it's now over 544,000 that we actually saved last year. Again, it's about that direction, and it's about actually making both improvements to how we operate and seeing those visible changes, so it's improvements. And even though we didn't have a target, we still managed to create a financial saving through that. And I think with the housing, it was been a mix of, there were some business improvement plans in this housing void space, so I wouldn't want to claim that Future Sheffield did all of that financial savings, but the work that we enabled meant that we could see those changes both in that voids reduction and that decrease in the B&B expenditure. And then finally, in terms of the complexity and working on demand and how we're going to do this, it is a big programme, which is why again at the end of Appendix 3 we have those risks and issues. We want to be really cognizant of the fact that what we are doing is big, and so that's why we have a really robust transformation office to manage that through. We have governance in the form of all of the strategic leadership team members are exec sponsors for the programmes, and the SROs are the directors for the different programmes. We are working with them to have that leadership of the programme, because again, governance and infrastructure will only work if we also have the leadership in this space too. And so we do have that infrastructure which we've been putting in place over the next 6 months. We are doing benefit tracking. We work really closely with our finance business partners to ensure that the savings that we attribute to Future Sheffield are not also attributed to the business improvement plans that we have in place for this year. So we're working really closely to track and monitor any benefits to ensure we're not double counting, so we could be really clear. Then when Jane presents, this is what's been a business improvement saving and what has been a future Sheffield saving. And we have that robustness, which again, I think we've not had before in terms of that corporate holding of the governance going forward.
Catherine's right. What we're trying to do is make sure that we don't have any double counting. And it's been a real big focus of the work in Future Sheffield to make sure we're not double counting. The other thing that I'd add for Councillor Otten is that when a new scheme is proposed, we very carefully look at the revenue implications of that, both in terms of additional cost that might be incurred, but also revenue that might be lost. We are planning to do a fees and charges review, which will start to pick up some of the modelling for future developments and also future implications and current implications of how parking is performing. I understand that there has been an assessment of capacity within car parks across the city, both council owned and private and on-street parking, and there is capacity available. There isn't an indication that we are at capacity for parking. But I take your point, we need to make sure we model that properly and make sure if there is an impact there, that we reflect that in the MTFS as a reduction in the fees and charges income that we receive. And then Councillor Naz, I think, just to add to your point, the points that you made and reference back to the Q4 report, our track record in delivery of savings has consistently improved over the last few years. The 24-25 delivery of agreed savings is about 90%. So again, if we can match that in Future Sheffield, it gives us a really good starting position to be able to have confidence that when we say we're going to deliver something, being able to quantify that, we can plan how we deliver it, and then we do deliver it.
Great, thank you. And Philip, thanks for touching on some of those important comments about the city centre, where we're seeing footfall increasing. And if anyone was in town over the weekend, you'll have seen that the Cross Wires Festival, amongst other things, had brought thousands of people into the city centre. What's taking place week by week is the transformation of the city centre with the creation of new high-quality public realm to make it a great place to live and to work. And as Philip says, to be really, really clear, there are thousands of car parking spaces in the city centre that people are using on a daily basis. And the parallel work that's taking place is how do we also improve choice so that people can have different forms of transport to come into the city centre, and the work that's being done to bring our buses back under public control, to be able to design the routes that people need, not the ones that the bus companies want to run for their interests, is really important, along with the active travel work to make it easier to walk and cycle and wheel around this city. They're the kind of long-term changes that the city needs, and of course the revenue implications, capital implications will be factored into the work, the budget planning work as we move forward. There are 5 members who've indicated what I propose to do is take those as a block and then come back to colleagues. So just so everyone knows where they are coming in the order: Councillor Moynihan, Crosthorne, Levery, Argencio and Maroof, in that order. So, Councillor Moynihan, please.
Thank you both. I think fair funding too is transformational for local government finance. Don't think it can be underestimated. It's non-competitive, it's flexible, and it's longer term. So linked to the work around Future Sheffield, I think we will get to a point where we revolutionise services that this council provides. I also welcome the focus on deprivation, that the government realises that we need more funding to work with our most deprived communities. And I just wondered, Philip, if you can share any early assessment around the fair funding settlement for the next 4 years.
Thank you. Councillor Crosthorne, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I really don't envy your jobs right now. I think you touched on the struggle a little bit with trying to forecast all of this, and especially with the double counting and everything. I would like to draw attention to the fact that in November, when Future Sheffield came to this committee, the anticipated annual revenue saving was £86 million. That was per year. And now we're seeing a total saving of 44.9 million. So I wonder if you could sort of shed some light on that.
Thank you. Councillor Levery, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to talk about Future Sheffield first. Every finance-led change initiative is doomed to failure. But this isn't. This is led for the right reasons. transformation of the organisation, improving a lot of our employees and improving a lot of our residents as a priority. And that is so important. The financial benefits are outcomes of that and difficult to predict. And quite often you find that sometimes you get more benefits than what you think. So congratulations, Catherine, on what you've done here. I think it's marvellous and I'm looking forward to that happening. What's happening, however, is it is helping our financial situation for the next 3 years and bringing down no longer 35 million but down to sort of 10 million range, the sorts of overspends, which is probably manageable within our reserves allocation. What happens then is it goes up again because the underlying issue is demand and growth. It's consistently running at around 7% of our budget. Now, either the government bring in policies to reduce that, because that affects all authorities, or we have to have a settlement agreement that looks at that and deals with that issue so that councils can manage the finances within the organisation that they've got. At some time, we will have to recover our reserves. We can't run without operational reserves forever. So, thanks for what you've done so far, Philip. Thanks for what's been put together. But I think I'd like to leave that message about growth and demand because that is the elephant in the room here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Argencio, please.
Thank you, Councillor Lever, for bringing the elephant in the room. You know, that what you've said is fundamentally what we need is, you know, we can't really avoid talking about this and we should make it clear. I just want to say, as someone who's been on the Future Sheffield group from the beginning, I'm really pleased with all the changes, but I think we need, and I know that this is in plan, I was trying to explain what Future Sheffield was today to a work experience student who is with me, extremely clever, and it's really difficult to explain even in a short paragraph what it is. And I don't know how we're going to do that strapline because it's not just for people out there, but it's also for our own councillors. Because whilst some of us have been very involved and seen the various permutations of it, it's such a complex program that it's not just one thing, it's lots of different things, but it is fundamentally about changing the way we work, using tech, digital, AI, and making kind of efficiencies in the way we work better together as one council. And I agree, is the starting point was improving what the outcomes. It wasn't saving. It was about doing better by the people of Sheffield. And so really it's exciting to see it in, you know, coming to fruition. And hopefully, you know, we'll have those better relations. I'm really excited about my account thing because I think that makes things easier for those people who can do that. But obviously, we've talked a lot about access also for people who are digitally excluded, improving digital access, but also catering for all. Can I come back to Councillor Otten? Because I have graphs sent to me from officers about parking in the city centre, off-street surface level, city centre parking, both for during the week for February and March 2025, and on Saturday, and most of the parking spaces are not taken. Parking services, in my experience as a ward councillor, are very reluctant to relinquish any parking spaces, even to allow 6 bikes to be parked on 1 parking spaces. So I think if they are looking at this, I'm sure that they are looking at the finances, but it's very right and proper that the finance team keep an eye on it in terms of us being able to afford it. But I think we shouldn't really always be negative about anything that means that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 100 parking spaces not available.
Councillor Maroof, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think my enthusiasm got the better of me and the Chief Executive was absolutely right. I should have hung on to look at page 83. on CRM, but it's a passion I have for CRM, and I'm glad that you've actually addressed it there. But can I just put it in a very simple terms? Because I know there's public out there listening to this. If I was to ring the telephone line, because some people are not very good at IT, and I'm probably one of them, would I get answered very quickly? Is one of the questions that you generally get asked on the doorstep. So that's one question. And secondly, what Councillor Levery and I think Councillor Argenzio have articulated far better than I can, is the issue around reserves. Is there going to come a time when we're going to look at the Council's assets to replenish the reserves? Because that's always been the sort of go-to point for all authorities. I mean, if you look at Birmingham, you look at Nottingham, you look at many of the other authorities, this is where they've all gone to replenish the reserves. And dare I say, Sheffield did many years ago, probably 20-odd years ago as well, if we've got anything left, that is. So that is another question or a point that I want to raise. And finally, the communication of this. I mean, it's a fantastic report you've done. The vision is absolutely brilliant. But to get that message across, we might understand it, but the members of the public, as Councillor Argenzio has pointed out, it's probably not as that easy for them to understand that. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you all very much. And really good to hear there's sort of strong cross-party support for the work that's gone on to develop the Future Sheffield programme, and that clear need to make sure we're communicating and telling that story in a clear way. Just on that point, CRM, customer relationship management, I think it's important that we're clear about what we're talking about here. So, do you want to come back on a range of comments there?
Yeah, thank you. I'll start with Councillor Moynihan's question about, do we have a number? The answer is no, we don't at the moment. I wouldn't want to give a number in public that, because the range is so big and it would have such a big impact, we're going to have to wait, which is really frustrating. I would love to be able to say, and this is the impact of what fair funding delivers. I'd love to have been able to build it into the MTFS, but we're just unfortunately not in that position at the moment. When we get the next version of the MTFS, or as soon as we have those numbers with some confidence, we will update the MTFS so that that's really clear on what the impact of fair funding is. I share your level of frustration that we don't have a number yet, but we are working away to try and get something that we agree with. We're working with our core city colleagues, as well as other people, including consultants who model this day in, day out. It's fair to say there are differing views across everybody that you speak to, and everybody has 3 or 4 versions of what they think the model could result in, and it's difficult to rebuild what other people have built because it comes back to a different answer. So it is quite complex, and we are trying hard to unpick what the result will be from fair funding. But as soon as we have something that we are confident in, we will, of course, come back and report that to you. Councillor Crosland, just on the sort of savings point, I think we've been really careful to include savings that we are confident we can deliver. So within the 45 million that's included in this report, it doesn't include the full scope of everything that we're looking at. So I think we are looking at other things that may well add up to that, towards 80 million. But certainly in terms of what we've delivered, and the reason that we've built it into the MTFS is that we're confident that we're able to deliver that. I would hope that that number increases each time we come back to you with greater confidence in the delivery of those savings. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is why it's been important that we've had a discovery phase, because of the making sure that we were confident in the figures that we were putting out. So we've done huge pieces of work of even just having a one view of what our establishment costs, because it's been a massive piece of work between Kerry Darlow's team and the people team to ensure we actually know what is costed in terms of our staffing and our vacancies in order to look at that. A big part of that figure is about the contract management and commissioning, and that's that third-party spend. We've not included that currently because we are still doing the validation. We are taking that robust approach. I suppose it's to give this committee assurance that the work that we are doing now isn't, oh, well, that will do. It really is, let's unpick and let's look under the skin of this. So we actually do create then a transformation programme that realistic and is deliverable. But yes, it was always labelled as a sort of anticipated benefits, but we do hope, as Philip said, that through this work that figure will increase going forward.
Councillor Levery, you made the point around demand and the 3-year period ends and then there's a big jump for 29-30. What we have been able to understand from the consultation with government and the conversations that we've been having since then is that the proposal from government is that they will look to make sure that the formulae that they're using every 3-year settlement will be assessed to make sure that they are using the most up-to-date data and information and that that's relevant as possible. So we would expect that towards the end of the 3-year settlement period, there is an update from government so that the next 3-year settlement period has an updated set of information and data that's used to inform how that funding is allocated. So it's not static, set in stone forever now. What the funding formula that we have had for the last 10 years hasn't really changed. So the funding formula that was used for the current budget for 25-26 was set in 2013-14. Some of the data that sits behind that relates back to 2009. So it is very out of date. So the commitment to look at that every 3 years is really welcome and should start to address some of those issues around demand because they will be addressed every 3 years at least.
So just to pick up, and I suppose just on the demand point as well, I think it's important when we're talking about Future Sheffield and we're saying about the improvements that we want to see sooner rather than later, this is also about creating an organisation that is able to look to the future and respond to the future, because we have demand, but we also know that things like AI and tech, I mean, so from us starting 18 months ago, not really talking about AI and digital strategy, to it really increasing in focus just 18 months later. In another 18 months, we just don't know the impact that's going to have. And we need to be an organisation that is able to respond to a more ambiguous and a more challenging environment that I don't think will go away. And it's about how do we design the organisation to be able to look at that, including the demand. So I think it's just important to try and look through, that's what we're trying to design into our services going forward. I just think the comms, absolutely great. We are working on a 6-month strategy now of what do comms and what's the different stakeholders, you know, who are the different people that we need to engage in, how do we engage with them? And that will include how actually can we support you better as elected members, how can we start to really sell that story externally and talk about this, how do we make that narrative clearer for our colleagues in the organisation. So I will take this back and feed this into the development of the 6-month strategy that we're currently working on. And then I think in terms of Councillor Murray, from that sort of customer experience, I'm very passionate about customer experience. So I came into local government because of people and to serve people and to do that in the best possible way. But we're really clear that improved customer experience won't be digital. It won't be digital only. It'll be digital first. So our aspiration is that as we move into a much more intuitive and better ways of working online, is that our customers, our face-to-face contact actually enables people to be able to spend more time with vulnerable, complex challenges, people who perhaps need more time, who can't use even the telephone or the digital. It is about, at the moment, though, a huge amount what goes through our contact centre is also it's about failure demand. It's the fact that you put something on the website, you don't know what's happened to it, you ring up, you're then caught in a long queue. This is not going to be solved in September when we introduce, or in the autumn when we introduce the My Account, in terms of that will be solved straight away. It will need to build confidence. I think it was Jonathan's paper where we talked about, plans give the direction and it will be delivery that builds the confidence. People will need to have time to build that confidence and that they will trust those other alternative methods. But also we're currently just about to recruit to a new head of operations in the customer experience, which is about bringing together the first sort of set of we have a number of front doors into this council currently. We're working, how do we consolidate that, have a consistent approach. And the head of the customer experience role, which I talked about in my introduction, really is we currently do not analyse or look at the data we get in terms of feedback, customer complaints, how do we work better. Taking that data, looking at not just what does that mean for continuous improvement, but what does that mean in terms of that workforce development piece? What does that mean in terms of the capabilities and the way in which we want people to work? We don't have that at the moment. We're not looking at that, and so therefore we're not making those changes in line to what our customers are telling us. This is a very different way of working. It will need time to embed, but I think the important thing is we are setting out on that journey with that real approach of putting our customer first, designing journeys, our customer journeys with the customer in the front, designing it for them rather than what would work for us.
Councillor Murphy, you asked about will we use the council's assets to potentially rebuild reserves. Page 132 of the pack just sets out a brief introduction into the accommodation work stream that exists as part of Future Sheffield. What we're doing is we've expanded the scope of our approach there to look at all of our land and property that the council owns. We're looking at having a 5-year strategy that aims to reduce our running costs, but also we'll look at what buildings should we have in the city, what buildings do we need, and what can we dispose of. So we're not taking the approach of panicking and having a fire sale, but there's a really considered approach that we're taking to what assets we need to be able to deliver our services, to support the work in the city, but also then to make sure that where we can reduce the number of assets that we have in the city, the number of buildings that we have, that we do look to dispose of buildings where it's appropriate.
Thank you very much for really comprehensive answers to those questions. Look, I think it's also worth reflecting on sort of some of the links between the papers on our agenda today. You know, if we think about the first paper we looked at today and that focus on prevention and public service reform, if we are as a council are saying this is how we want to structure our services, these are key areas for us, we will be a very different organisation by the time we get to the end of the medium-term financial strategy period. And so the certainty that we'll be able to have right now about that final year is very different from what the organisation will look like by the time we get there. And we'll also have the fair funding review concluded, and we'll be able to see the implications of that. And I think it's right now that we're not building in those figures because we're still working through the assessment of what the consultation could mean. But I think in there are some real positives that many councillors have been calling for a long time: a multi-year financial settlement, an end to that kind of Hunger Games style bidding where councils have to bid for small pots of money from multiple different bid pots, council tax equalisation, and allowing us to plan for the longer term, all underpinned by targeting resource to where in the country it is most needed and where there are high levels of deprivation. So these are real positives, and we'll look forward to the full policy statement from the government in September on that. So we spent a lot of time discussing both the MTFS and Future Sheffield today, and I think it's been a really helpful discussion today. We've got 9 recommendations which are set out on page 73. Let me just briefly summarise them so that people are clear who may be watching at home. But this committee is recommended to note the current financial position, approve the MTFS for 26-27 through to 29-30, note the MTFS budget gap, note that the adverse movement in that is mainly as a result of expanding the MTFS period to include 29-30 and increased demand pressures. Note for consideration the key assumptions applied in determining that MTFS budget gap, endorse the proposed approach to ensure the financial sustainability of the council over the medium term, approve the recommended proposed changes that will take place across each layer of the target operating model under Future Sheffield, accepts the detailed update on progress of the Future Sheffield transformation programme, and approve the proposed next steps for Future Sheffield to progress with the implementation of the target operating model. Are members happy to support those recommendations? Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Catherine. Right, item number 13 on our agenda today is about the Sheffield Legends scheme, and we're joined to present this item by Kate Josephs and Jason Deach. Jason and Kate, for the benefit of people in the room and watching at home, could you introduce yourselves, please, and then introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Kate Josephs, Chief Exec, and presenting this on behalf of the Chief Operating Officer. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Jason Deach, Head of Democratic Services.
So, Chair, earlier you laid down a challenge, I think, to draw a line of connection between all the papers that we have on the agenda today. And so I am going to take that challenge and talk about a Sheffield legend that I had the great privilege of meeting on Friday with the Lord Mayor, Sir Michael Palin, who received a Legends Star outside the Town Hall in 2007. As you mentioned, Michael Palin was here over the weekend for the Crossed Wires Festival, and he commented a couple of things. One, he hadn't been back to the city for a long time, and he was incredibly positive about his experience and what he saw in the transformation of the city. He also said he couldn't remember a time that he'd felt so welcome back in his home city. So I just want to say a massive thank you to all the teams who are part of that. And this paper really is about us as a council recognising that we are incredibly lucky as a city to have a whole raft of incredible people who have come from the city or have a deep personal connection to the city and have gone on to make a massive difference nationally and indeed globally. And it is the case that the legends who are celebrated with their names on plaques outside the town hall have not, that we haven't updated or had a process to update that, those legends for quite some time. Members of the committee will remember that back in 2022 we agreed a refreshed approach to civic awards across 3 types of award given to celebrate achievements: freedom of the city, which is the highest honour that the city can bestow on people from the city. The Lord Mayor's Awards, which were launched last year by the previous Lord Mayor, Councillor Jane Dunn, and again will happen this year, and were a fantastic celebration of community impact all over the city here in the Town Hall, supported by a number of sponsors from across Sheffield. The part of the trio that we haven't yet done anything about, and we're really proud to be bringing forward today, is the reinstatement of the Sheffield Legends process. And we're partly also able to do that because of the aforementioned physical transformation of the city centre with Town Hall Square, the regeneration of Fargate and Pinston Street now either complete or underway. So we've outlined an approach. This is in line with the processes that have been agreed for all of the other civic awards that were agreed by SNR previously, namely that we hand over the assessment and triage of nominations and suggestions for those to be honoured to a very diverse panel of organisations and individuals across the city of Sheffield, to provide advice to us as a council as to who should receive the honour of receiving a Legend Star. So we're proposing to use the momentum from the development of our public realm, the successful Lord Mayor Awards I mentioned, to launch a short focus campaign seeking public nominations for the Legends. All the nominations received will be considered by the awards panel I mentioned, and we are looking to up to 10 new plaques to be installed in 2025-26. We'll launch a 6-week public campaign this summer, asking the public to nominate individuals or groups of individuals for a Sheffield legend. And again, the criteria particularly focused on people who've made a national or global impact. There are both digital channels and other methods, including through using our network of libraries to make sure the nomination process is open to as many people to participate in as possible. And obviously we are incredibly keen for elected members both on this committee and across the council to encourage people to nominate. Once nominations close, we'll convene a meeting of the awards panel and we'll make sure that there is obviously due diligence built into that procedure so the panel is able to make informed recommendations as to which of the nominations will be granted a Sheffield legend, after which we will get on with the process of having those plaques manufactured, installed, and that will also include the installation of 2 previous recipients of legend status, Joe Root and Danny Willett, getting their plaques installed as well. Hopefully that's fairly straightforward. Jason, have I missed anything that you want to say? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and successfully done to link together various items on our agenda. Thank you. So a number of people have indicated. I saw Councillor Agencio first, and then Councillor Otten.
Thank you for the report, and thank you, Jason, for sending the list with the panel earlier today. My first question is about the panel. Is the panel closed, or can other organisations join? For example, it would be good to have like an LGBT plus organisation of that in terms of having that voice there as well. I did a quick search of how many plaques there are, because to be honest, the only one that I remember from outside is Jessica Ennis. It's not something that you stop and look, but they are really pretty. And there are 21 according to Wikipedia, of which only 4 are women. So hopefully we'll get nomination for some amazing, extraordinary women from Sheffield, or who have a profile in Sheffield, and we can have more women. And I'm very happy to support this. I think we should celebrate more what the city does, and I'm glad to hear that there will be some kind of due diligence in terms of what kind of people are going to be selected for the awards. But yeah, it's a really excellent idea to do something, because I think the last one was awarded in 2019, so it has been quite a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Austin, please.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm very pleased to hear about Joe Root. Obviously, anything to big up Dawn Tolly Ward is much appreciated. I am a little bit concerned. I've looked at the list on Wikipedia of the current holders of the things, and I guess one thing I'd say is, I won't diminish any of them. I think I'm sure they'll deserve it. I recognise most of the names. I think that's important. If you put in people there who the general public of Sheffield don't recognise, more than 1 or 2, then it does start to raise the question, what is this and how do you get it? So it's important that these are kind of well-known people. I'm always surprised, sorry to digress, when I see Joe Cocker there, that Jarvis Cocker isn't there, but maybe that's something about my age more than anything else. I'm obviously not saying anything against Joe Cocker. But I'm concerned that if we're going to say, there are 21, 23 now, if those 2 are adding, we want to add another 10. That is, I'm slightly worried that adding 10 at once is going to dilute the standard a little bit, and we will be putting in people who might not be as well known, even if they are people of great merit. And the importance of a legend is that it's not just merit, is it? We have other awards, we have the Freedom of the City and so on, for people who deserve it, if you like, but people who are legends have to be legendary. So I'm just a little bit concerned by saying we want 10, we might be diluting that, and I really hope we don't do that. I've also looked, so thanks for who sent it round, the list of 74 people and organisations are on the larger panel, and there's some great people and organisations in there. It's not said, I don't see in the report quite how we whittle that down to a panel of a properly diverse and representative and so on panel to make decisions. Again, that has to be done right. And I notice in there we've got public sector, private sector, third sector and individuals, and I would hope that balance is maintained when the panel goes forward, as well as diversity in other respects. So I don't know. I just can you reassure me we are talking about legendary? I would expect the city to produce really legendary people of the type we've got in this list at a rate of less than 10 a year, maybe even only 2 or 3 a year. Thank you.
Joe, we are a city of makers, creators, hard workers who've gone on to create and do extraordinary things around the world and in this country, and there should be no limit on our ambitions. So I do not think that it would be wise to put a cap on the number of legends that come out of this city. Everyone should be able to go as far as they want in this city and achieve legendary status. So just for the avoidance of doubt, I think it's important to say that, and also to be clear that Joe Cocker is indeed a Sheffield legend, just to make sure that we include that in the record. If you want to nominate anyone else who has the same surname, you and other members of the public will have a 6-week window, which opens soon. So thank you very much for your early entry.
Thank you, Tom, for that. Can I just say, I mean, I agree, perfectly fair to say that. The famous Hollywood stars outside, wherever it is in Hollywood, there are thousands upon thousands of them. They have been completely diluted. You can pay however many $1,000 and have one. And I know we're not doing that, but people might think we're doing that if we have too many and they don't know who they are.
Okay, set the record straight, please, Kate.
Thank you, Councillor Otten. I'll hand over in a second to Jason to just speak about the panel and how that works, and indeed to confirm, Councillor Agencio, to your point, that is we want that to be an open panel. So if there are organisations or individuals who we think should be invited or asked to join, that would be great. It was a panel that essentially was made up of people who came forward when we did the previous paper. So just on the point around the number of plaques, the key thing to point out here is, as Councillor Argencio has stated, we haven't done this for quite some time. So while I don't want to get into a kind of scientific rate of plaques per year conversation, we think we have, we could argue there is potentially a backlog of this conversation. So we want to do a bit of a relaunch, get ourselves back into the rhythm, as any proud city should do, of having a regular conversation about celebrating the successes of our people. And that was absolutely core to the conversation that we had when we signed off the new Civic Awards approach, which includes, as I've mentioned, Freedom of the City and the annual Lord Mayor Awards. But yeah, I think what's really important here is that we're not saying the panel have to find 10 people. We're saying that we're suggesting up to 10, and the criteria are the important thing. So this, I'll restate it for the record. An individual or group with a strong and well-known association with Sheffield that has made a substantial contribution to the positive promotion of the city. Their reputation should be such that they are a nationally or globally well-known public figure with a high level of acclaim or standing due to being at the top of their field, and which clearly demonstrates their level of status and achievement. I think we feel that criteria is fairly stringent, and we will certainly work with the panel to ensure that that is adhered to. Jason.
Thanks. On the panel itself, yes, it does remain open for people to add names to it. So we're really keen that it stays current and it stays representative, and we actually have a balance of the various sectors in there, so that's really important. In actually getting individual panels together, we'd seek a panel of about 9 people and make sure that there's cross-representation there from that wider pool. So we actually have a good mix, and it represents the various sectors in the city when the ledgers are considered and nominations are considered, and then according to the criteria, and then a checklist to support that.
And that's largely driven by availability, right?
Yes. Yeah, so yeah, the availability of the panel members themselves are obviously important in that, but I think we have quite a mix that we can draw on other people if some people aren't available from a particular sector.
Great, thank you very much. I think this is a really positive step forward, a sign that the city is celebrating success of people who are a source of great civic pride, and it is right that we honour the great achievements of people who are from our city, connected to our city, who've gone on to achieve that national and international acclaim, who inspire people and who continue to inspire them. And so look, we want to hear from the public about who do you think should be added to Sheffield's Walk of Fame? Who are the Sheffield legends who we think should be recognised? And I think if members take this decision today, this summer we'll have the opportunity to begin that process, and really would encourage all members here to help to spread the word so that we get as many people engaged in this process as possible over the coming weeks. The people of this city are rightly proud of those who go on to achieve success, and it's time that we got back into the habit of really honouring the success in a very public way outside the front of this building. So I think then we turn to the recommendations, which are that we endorse the proposed approach to a relaunch of the Sheffield Legends scheme, including timescales and planned activity, agree the criteria for the Legends scheme, which we read out earlier on, and that we request that the Chief Operating Officer to progress the activity outlined in the report, including a campaign to seek public nominations and the installation of Sheffield Legends plaques in the city centre. Are members happy to support that recommendation? Excellent. Thank you very much. That concludes our meeting for today. Thank you all very much for your questions. Thanks to the officers for introducing the report. Our next meeting will be in September. Thank you all very much.